Good morning, and welcome to another live cast of the Pirate News. This is your happy Quartermaster Joseph. We have our guest speakers, Jamie, who is the pirate captain for Massachusetts, as well as Steve and Malt. So we want to really bring up what we've been really working on these last few weeks, and we got quite a long list of things to get through today. So the first thing being up on our docket is the sex worker petition. Jamie, could you tell me where we stand for that?
Last time I checked, we have over 130 signatures. We are calling for the Boston Police Department to start a moratorium on arresting sex workers. As folks may know, if a sex worker is abused or harmed, they have no recourse. They can't talk to police and help to put that person behind bars because they could fear themselves that they would be arrested. So to remove that impediment, we want to make sure that the Boston Police Department, as a start, decides not to arrest sex workers so that they can, so that they have recourse and they can talk to the police should they get abused.
No, just going back.
For us, it's a workers' right issue.
So just going into a little bit more depth about this particular issue, we at the Pirate Party definitely stand against human trafficking. We are totally against slave labor of any kind, whereas sex work itself isn't necessarily an innate bad thing, just the things around what forces people into it. So the reason why we're taking a stand on this is because there's been a lot of violence towards those who are just simply trying to make a living, and where we really want to help make the distinction between the two, which they are often convoluted. And one of the things is when they are convoluted together, and by outright banning it, much similar the way the Cannabis Commission was formed in order to make it better for those, so that there was less violence around something that people are already doing.
And one thing I'll just add, recently there was they crunched the numbers in San Francisco, and they found that with the introduction of FOSTA, which allows people to sue things like Backpages, which no longer exists, or Craigslist, or any internet service provider, allows them to sue should a sex trafficker use their website. And that's stifled. It used to be that there would be sex workers would be able to go online to Craigslist or other things and be able to kind of figure out who they wanted as their clients or not. And since the introduction, but with FOSTA, they can't do that because now there's a liability on the part of the internet service providers. And as a result, trafficking in San Francisco has gone up 170% since the introduction of FOSTA. So actually what we're seeing is laws that were justified as stopping sex trafficking or hindering sex trafficking are actually having the opposite effect.
It's brought pimps back in a big way. Anyone that has a reliable client list like pimps used to, this has been a godsend to them because it removes the agency from the worker themselves, and it puts it back in the hands of the people that are doing the trafficking and doing the abusing.
Exactly. So in all sorts of ways, FOSTA has really just become a way to drive it further underground, and thus the people who are actually doing the work are at greater risk and greater harm. And so we want to call upon our local government to try and resolve this.
Yeah,
we'll link to the petition in the description.
Yeah, the legislation on its face does not work. It doesn't do what the legislator said it was going to do. It doesn't.
I think we might have lost Malt there.
I think so too.
Oh, sadness.
I'm sure he'll come back.
So, unfortunately, we're having some technical difficulties with Malt, but we will go ahead and go back on to the next topic.
Help design.
Oh, wait, there you are. There you are.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you completely froze at what it was doing. So if you wanted to say that last piece again.
So it puts the power back in the hands of the pimps that have the client list. The legislation on its face does not work. It does not address the problems it was set out to address. It doesn't do what the legislator said it does. It's basically the worst kind of government overreach. It helps no one and harms all.
Very much agree with you on that. And all it did was allow the government to reach into bank accounts and access your personal information even further, almost like an extension of the Patriot Act.
That's
we all know
law. That one didn't get passed.
The Patriot Act got squashed?
Yeah, no, this just allows people to sue. It removes the liability protection as part of the Section 230. Yeah, of the Communications Decency Act, I think. It removes that liability in regards to sex trafficking.
Okay.
So bank accounts, thankfully, that bill, which got through the House, did not get through the Senate. We expect it'll come back. We'll keep our eye out.
So we'll put in a link to our petition as well, if you guys can go ahead and let your friends know. And again, this is not that we're promoting trafficking. We're actually trying to help stop the trafficking. So if you can sign that petition, it would really help us out. Now, with that being said, let's go on to a topic that's a little bit more lighthearted. There was some news in Gizmodo that a lady who tried to go free of all the tech giants. And I believe, Jamie, you know quite a bit more about this. Would you enlighten us?
Sure. Kashmir Hill attempted to live her life without Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Facebook, and one other.
Netflix?
No, not Netflix. That was just, an Apple, sorry. And each week I think she started with Amazon. She had someone set up a special virtual private network that she would go through that would block any request to any of Amazon's servers. And so the first week I think was Amazon, and subsequent week she added Google and Apple and all these other tech behemoths to the block list. And basically she found it's not possible to do it becomes impossible in so many ways to go about your normal life, to communicate with people. It becomes very difficult. For example, even going to some government websites, they were either hosted on AWS or they used some Amazon services, and all those things got blocked, which made it extremely difficult, if not impossible, to use them. She couldn't use Signal which is a chat, video, audio, secure messaging system that we've taught people how to use. That's hosted on AWS, so she couldn't use that. And essentially, when people go and say, well, you don't have to use Amazon, you can use something else, for large numbers of people, that really isn't possible. These behemoths are so woven into our lives in ways that we don't even know, that it becomes impossible to boycott them, not without returning to the 1980s or 1990s in terms of your internet access.
Yeah, she was talking about the difficulty of trying to send a multi-megabyte file from one user to another, and all of the alternatives to Google Drive and Dropbox, even the open source ones like send.firefox. Whatever, and the Rise Up FTP server all operate on the Amazon Web Service. So she was not able to.
That's completely true. I think she ended up using the Firefox system, but Rise Up had like she had like a 25 megabyte limit, and she had something significantly bigger than that. I don't know if she tried file.pizza. I'm not sure if that's hosted on AWS. I've used that. That's peer-to-peer. But yeah, I mean, Dropbox was on AWS.
So wouldn't this really be going into some of the anti-monopoly trust laws that we have shot down so many times? What Microsoft got sued over and lost horribly about the monopoly laws again? Would you say it falls into something like that?
My thought is we need to break them up. They're just too big to exist. We have banks that are too big to fail. We have companies like Amazon that are too big to live, as far as I'm concerned. And if something like 50% of web commerce is done over Amazon, that may not be a monopoly technically, but it's certainly getting, you throw in Target, you throw in Walmart, and now you're talking about a nice oligopoly right there.
Yeah.
One of the things I think is also worth considering is what happened with Wells Fargo earlier this week. So Wells Fargo had a data center, I believe, Minnesota, where a fire suppression system was accidentally triggered, and it essentially took the data center offline. Now, supposedly they had plans, a disaster recovery plan in place, and it did not work. So, there's disaster recovery plans are only, they're only good if you periodically exercise them. I mean, a company I worked for, we had 2 data centers, and we did failovers every week for product testing. So, we were pretty well versed in the routine, and this can be done smoothly. Now, if that sort of business continuity resilience is not part of the corporate culture, it's not something that management prioritizes, you will end up with a disaster recovery system that just leaves you with a disaster. I think Wells Fargo got online after a couple of days, but during that period, checks were not, people couldn't access money in their account, direct deposits, direct payments were not working. So the similarity in this case is, well, if Google or Amazon has an extended period of outage, which, I mean, they have had little ones over time where you'll lose part of the AWS cloud in one area or another. But
it happened in 2018, I think. Like a bunch of stuff went down for a few days.
Yeah, the moral. I think the moral of the story is, if you put all of your eggs in your one basket, you have to be very. You will be in trouble if that basket falls and your eggs break.
Even in a case where what happened with Patreon, where all of their systems and their databases slowed down, the impact, or in the case of a government shutdown, the impact of financial burdens that it places upon people because of a failure in the system in one form or another. Just, it impacts people's lives so detrimentally on the systems that they've grown to rely on. And most of the time you don't even see it coming, and it will still just roll over you. And the people... Sorry, go ahead, Malt.
Oh, I was going to say, going off of that, it's honestly astonishing how much we've come to rely on the internet, given how really not reliable a lot of the times it is. Like, you'll have verification servers falling offline that'll make huge swaths of software just unusable. Like, if for whatever reason Valve decides to shut down Steam, that's going to just demolish the PC gaming, cult. Blood cult, whatever, child sacrifice pit.
Don't get me started on Steam and
good entertainment.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, going off what Malt just said, I think that we should really look at Steam and how they just made it impossible for any competition.
But like the home security setups that now rely on the internet. Like, are you telling me that someone can like knock out the internet to like a high class expensive neighborhood and then just merrily go door to door, you know, robbing them blind. Like the internet is integral to integral life in a way that it really wasn't designed to be, and I don't think it has the capacity to be what we're using it for.
Don't get me started on the Internet of Things.
But I mean, one of the things that this points to is that so many of our technologies are simply client-server based, not redundant, not peer-to-peer, such that you can, you know, one company can get such large economies of scale that no one can compete with them. And because they're not set up out of the box to be peer-to-peer, I can't share necessarily easily with someone else something that I create without, as we are here, using YouTube, which has also had its share of outages. And that's why we need, you know, one of the solutions is not simply to break these folks up, but to re-engineer how we use the internet and the technologies underlying it such that it's peer-to-peer and cannot be centralized.
And that actually leads us right into our next topic, believe it or not, which is what we really need to focus on is the copyright law itself. And our next topic is literally what's going on in the EU right now with their copyright law. Would one of you guys like to go into further detail of that? With the EU copyright law? I'm not as familiar.
I mean, the EU is... it's gone through the European Parliament, and they have some both Baroque and Baroque system of decision-making that is consultation of governments and the EU, and I don't know all the details. But basically, you know, they're trying to put in upload filters such that anyone who has a website, and there may be, it may be, if you are over a certain size, you don't have to do this, but it's unclear. But you'll have to do an upload filter and scan everything that gets uploaded for copyright infringement. Additionally, they also want to put in a link tax, which has been in place in Germany and has been an abysmal failure, such that if you do more than a tiny snippet of what the article is, then you have to pay whomever owns the copyright on the article some amount of money to link to it. And you know, links are so fundamental to the web. It's basically a pointer to here's something over here you may want to look at. Well, you click on the link and you go. And if you know, we've seen where this gets implemented, you know, places like Google or any place that has links basically is like, yep, we're leaving. We're not going to go and link to things because if we do that, we're going to have to pay some stupid amount of money. So it looked like the bill was going to fail, but apparently Germany, according to Julia Reda, the pirate MEP from Germany, France and Germany made a deal that may move this forward, but no one's happy with it. People who anti-censorship folks like us, and even the copyright monopolists, aren't in favor of some of these changes. So we'll see where it goes. It goes before the European Parliament sometime in March or April. And so we're urging folks who live in Europe to tell their MEP to oppose this bill. Yeah.
And so what excuse me for a second as I stumble upon my words, but specifically what we're speaking about is the directive Articles 11 and 13, which has been dubbed the link tax and the upload filter by its critics. And really, it seems like a disconnect between the voting parliament and the rest of the world. So we really need to have people reach out and try and fight this one, because this one, as Captain Jamie was saying, nobody is happy about.
I mean, additionally, if it passes in Europe, it's going to make it more likely to pass in other countries, because they'll just point to Europe. Look, Europe is censoring their internet, so we can censor our internet. And it's like, the free and open web, unfortunately, starts getting taken down bit by bit.
I mean, wouldn't that be a violation of our First Amendment, freedom of speech?
First Amendment doesn't apply to non-American countries.
No, but the one thing that may get it kiboshed in America is our First Amendment.
Oh yeah, I mean, First Amendment does not touch copyright. Like, copyright has been running roughshod over First Amendment for, probably longer than we've been alive.
You mean songs that were made 70 years ago and they're still using copyrights on?
Yep, like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star.
Birthday.
That's no longer in
copyright.
Happy Birthday, I think, is out of copyright.
Oh, thank God.
But yeah, I mean, Public Domain Day came this last year, and thankfully, different stuff that was under copyright is no longer under copyright, like Khalil Gibran's The Prophet, the Charleston, various other things. We have a blog post about that. Yeah, I mean, the Supreme Court has a very interesting viewpoint about the First Amendment, and I don't know how they would vote on this. I mean, it seems to me that any censorship regime is going to be anathema to the First Amendment, but who knows with the Supreme Court? They do seem to be quite willing to support the powerful and the rich. So,
and again, we need to fight back from us little guys getting taken advantage of time and time again. Fight the good fight. So, speaking of fighting the good fight, coming up to the next thing on our docket is our regional meetings, where we are looking to sprinkle around Boston, you being able to come and visit us and meet us in person.
You get together with other pirates in your region.
Exactly, as well as trying to learn some tips and tricks and stuff like that. I know with mine, I'm going to want to have a crypto party kind of attached to it. As well as help people run for office. So our first regional meeting coming up, I believe, is down in Somerville. We're still trying to plan the final details.
Somerville, the Boston area. Yeah, we're trying to figure out the final details. Hopefully we'll know early this week.
Perfect.
I'm going to be hosting one in Worcester at the Worcester Public Library. I don't have a specific date out yet because I haven't done the work, but it will be at between March or April.
Yep, and I will be hosting one in Lowell, Mass, at the Pollock Library come the end of March. And that's what we got so far for that, but we're still working on the final details. I just have one more piece of paper to submit to the Pollock Library, and then it will be set in stone.
And if there's anyone who wants to do it in your neighborhood or region, do send us email at info@masspirates.org. And we're happy to, work with you to make that a reality.
Yep. And again, we want to continue making us more of a stronger presence and fighting for what is right on your behalf and everyone else's. So that being said, we do have some voting for your Pirate Party officials for our Massachusetts chapter coming up as well. We have a hard date of April 23rd, where we will be doing where the final votes will be due, but definitely more to come on that. We're going to be using the old system that we used last time. Steve, do you remember sorry to put you on the spot, but so what did that look like last time we did the vote?
If I recall correctly, we mailed out, essentially little announcements with a link to a voting form, and along with a link to a voting form was a voting token. So the token is just a little series of random numbers that you put in as part of, when you're filling out the form, so that we can, it basically lets us know that yes, this is a valid vote, but or a valid token, but it doesn't. We don't tie the tokens back to individual people. So, basically we could say that yes, this is a valid vote from from a pirate. But yeah, it's a web form.
Perfect. And so all you need is a computer to do this, or you could always go to a library for it. So to be on that list, it was being a pirate supporter through our normal email list, correct?
I believe so, yes.
Right. Yeah. People can go to our website and sign up. We'll have a date whereby they have to have signed up by, which will be probably the start of the voting process. Okay,
perfect. So yeah, so definitely sign up at info or on our pirate wiki, I believe.
Masspirates.org.
Masspirates.org. Thank you for the correction. So,
and additionally, we have many openings. So if people, want to be able to chart the direction of the party and, do the work that's involved, we'd love people to apply. Consider, we haven't set the date by which we will end the nomination process, but by all means, people can email us, submit their names and a bio, and we'll put them on, and any other information we'll need from people we'll ask. But we will be posting that. We'll decide that at the upcoming meeting on Wednesday on IRC. You can find that on our sidebar at masspirates.org on how to join those meetings. And we'll post all the details so people know.
All right. Excellent. Thank you for that, gentlemen. I do appreciate that. So as you can tell, we have a guest speaker today who is joining Jamie, which would be Steve, the former quartermaster.
Hello.
And he's actually here to tell us what's going on in Arlington today.
So there's, just to provide a little context, I'm a town meeting member in Arlington. So town meeting is a town's legislative body. In Arlington, we have 252 members, 12 people from each of 21 precincts who were elected to 3-year terms. And we essentially function as the town's legislature. So town legislative schedule typically works on an annual basis. You'll have local elections in the spring, followed by an annual town meeting. And where the purpose of the meeting is to hear warrant articles, which are essentially do the legislative business of the town. So one of this year's big legislative items is going to be zoning. The Arlington has a master plan, and once it was approved and once we cleaned up, did an editorial cleanup on our zoning laws, the next step is to start implementing things that were suggested or recommended directions in the master plan. There turns out to be quite a bit of disagreement upon how to interpret those directions. But, there's a bit of interesting history involved. So back in the mid-70s, Arlington completely rewrote its zoning bylaws, and at the time the really big concern seems to have been apartments. Because we essentially had a scenario where if we needed housing, somebody came along and built it. And generally it was, working class housing, sort of inexpensive, and that was that. There was a bit of a backlash to apartments and just an overall desire to reduce the amount of people living in town. And where that claim comes from is just some of the planning board's efforts. So they did build out studies and said, well, under our old zoning bylaw, we can, estimate the maximum population of the town is this, and under this new proposed zoning bylaw, we can estimate the maximum population of the town is this other number, which happens to be something like 13 or 15,000 people. People smaller. So they said, yeah, we want fewer people in town. So in order to accomplish this, what they essentially, they took a very thorough, multifaceted approach. It's, and looking back at it, it's almost kind of sinister in a couple of ways. But the two of the things,
this is all completely above board, and
this is all completely above board. Well, you got to remember that. So your typical zoning laws is dozens of pages long. It's going to be dense legal text, and this is the 70s, so there's not an internet. Yeah. So one of the big concerns that before, as this was going to debate in 1975, was, will folks have a chance to read it before the town meeting where we debate it? But anyway, two of the things that Arlington decided to do at the time was to really reduce the amount of multifamily housing that's allowed, and also to zone something like 70% of the town for single family detached. So one of the things about zoning is that, you know, you can't necessarily write your laws to say that rich people over here, poor people over here, but you can write your laws to say this area is single family and this area is in apartments. And we chose to write our laws to say that 70% of it was single family. So, you know, right now, housing prices in Arlington, like a lot of, you know, Metro Boston areas, are kind of ridiculous. In the past years, it seems to have affected the town relatively uniformly, but now certain neighborhoods are, you know, their assessments are going way up, which means their property taxes are going way up, which means, well, not only were we going to be talking about, well, we'll just say that I think we're going to be spending a lot of time talking about housing and the cost of living and the cost of taxes and such. It will be an interesting spring in Arlington.
So just to give you some context, again, as far as going into who Jamie, or I'm sorry, not Jamie, what Steve did originally for the party is he was originally the quartermaster before I became the quartermaster, and he went off to get very much involved in all of what he was just discussing, and that left the gap. So that's why it's so important that for the voting is coming up, because we, again, like Jamie said, we have a lot of openings and coming up. So we really do need your participation if we're going to continue to grow and make actual changes. And right now, Steve is in the middle of it and getting all that history for us. And I appreciate you for sharing that with us. And it sounds like it's quite the debacle. And I'm glad we have somebody open and honest to really get in there and fight for the people.
And just can you say something for those of us after my summary, for those of us that need a little bit of, you know, a feel good moment, we'd like to look at your cat.
Hello, everybody. This is Tim. He is my boss.
He's the boss of all.
Yeah. So yeah, it's honestly fascinating to see how the different forces in the metro area have kind of not exactly conspired to create this clusterfuck, but like the way intentions go head to head in any institution that goes for long enough. It's fascinating to see how like a city builds itself over time.
And there's, I mean, one of the things that, you know, Massachusetts, and I wonder about it. We've kind of did away with county level government
Unfortunately.
a few years ago. So especially with respect to things like land use and transportation. So we're talking like, you know, road congestion, you know, the cost of living, et cetera, et cetera. There's not a whole lot of regional ability to do stuff. I mean, there are groups like the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, which provides technical assistance, and there is the Massachusetts Mayor's Coalition, which, you know, again, you're trying to get a whole bunch of towns to work together on a common goal. But, you know, there's, to a certain extent, the municipalities are, we'll just say there's sometimes towns and cities tend to think of problems as some other town and city's problem. And it's hard to bring them together and, you know, to try to work on something cooperatively.
Especially when they're Springfield and Cambridge, which are two vastly different, not only different parts of the state, but just different compositions.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean,
different economic situations.
Yeah, I mean, if you take a look at the metropolitan area, the immediate metropolitan area, you've got, you know, Boston, Cambridge, Somerville, Quincy, Everett, Chelsea, Lawrence is a little farther up, but you know, as you go further west, you know, the composition does change. And I mean, and even if you go to a city like Amherst, which is fairly further west, it's very different than what we have on, you know, it's not the same concentration of people that we have in the Metro Boston area.
Although they have their own, having taken my son to school UMass Amherst. They have their own sprawl.
Mm-hmm.
That's very much evident. Yeah, I mean, you raise a wider point, which is in Massachusetts we have 351 cities and towns, and we have one legislature, and we have counties that really do register of probate. Some have sheriffs, some all have district attorneys, but really there's no legislature at a county level, and we've pretty much put all of our power either in municipalities or the state, and having no intermediate organizational bodies that can kind of think regionally, or for those who are so inclined bioregionally or by watershed, on their collective interests. And so we get problems where we're not adequately funding the MBTA, for example, because there's folks in Western Mass, quite rightly, who are like, why are we spending money on Boston?
They get nothing from it.
Exactly. And so, you know, we've in so many ways, we functionally don't have a democracy. I mean, in Massachusetts, something like 60% of all of the legislative districts have no challenger in the general election. And oftentimes, the only challenger they might see is in a primary, which functionally isn't a challenger. So,
like I would put that like an additional depressing factor in public turnout is that the positions of power that are accessible to folks like us, you know, common everyday average lumpen prole, is that they have basically no ability to affect the kind of systemic change that people want to see. Like Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez talks about the Green New Deal. She talks about 70% tax on the rich, and yeah. Like she got there with 2 years of unrelenting hard work in an urban environment where she was able to reach her constituency on foot, putting holes in her shoes. You know, someone out in you know, Greenfield, Massachusetts, somewhere out there who can run for like city office or a position in their municipality, they're not going to be able to, you know, make the kind of change that inspires folks for that kind of turnout.
All right. And I fully agree with that. So we really need to do something to put more boots on the ground and maybe follow by that example to affect some of these changes. So we need you folks out there. And I just wanted to also give a shout out to all of our new subscribers as well. Thank you for joining us. And hopefully you can share and like this video and let more people know about your local boys on the ground trying to make these changes for you. Please leave some comments in the comment section below. And gentlemen, thank you all for your time. And hopefully we continue working on this and making it grow.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.